The dusty platform in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, creaked under the weight of shame as Olivia Harper stood with her wrists bound, her honey-colored hair falling across her face, while men she'd never seen before examined her like livestock under the harsh August sun of 1878. The auctioneer, a portly man with sweat stains spreading across his shirt, raised his gavel with theatrical flourish. His voice boomed across the town square where curious onlookers had gathered, drawn by the spectacle of a debt auction, that cruel practice where the desperate were sold into indentured servitude to satisfy creditors. "We've got ourselves a healthy specimen here, gentlemen. 22 years old, can read and write, knows her way around a kitchen and a garden. Her father's debts total $300, and whoever takes responsibility for this young woman assumes the debt. She'll work it off, of course." He paused, letting his words sink into the crowd. "Now then, who'll take her?" Olivia wanted to disappear into the wooden planks beneath her feet. 3 months ago, her father had been alive. Their small homestead had been thriving, and she'd had dreams of becoming a schoolteacher. Then the fever came. It took her father in 4 days, leaving her alone with nothing but his gambling debts and the crumbling remains of everything they'd built together. The bank had been merciless, and when she couldn't pay, they'd brought her here, to this platform, to be auctioned off like a horse or a plow. The crowd murmured, but no one stepped forward. Men whispered to each other, calculating the cost versus the benefit. Some looked at her with pity, others with something darker that made her skin crawl. The auctioneer shifted his weight, growing impatient. "Come now, surely someone needs help on their ranch. She's young, strong, and from what I understand, she's got a good temperament." Still silence. Olivia closed her eyes, trying to imagine herself anywhere else. She thought about the books her mother used to read to her before the cholera took her when Olivia was just 10. She thought about the meadow near their old homestead, where wildflowers grew in purple and gold waves. She thought about anything except the humiliation of this moment. $250 and I'll throw in a month's worth of supplies, the auctioneer cajoled, dropping the price. "That's $50 off, gentlemen. Quite a bargain." A rough laugh came from somewhere in the crowd. What kind of debts did her old man have that she's worth that much trouble? The auctioneer's face reddened. "Now, see here. This is a legitimate transaction. The girl's father owed money to 3 different establishments in town, and someone's got to settle up. If no one takes her, she'll be sent to a workhouse in Chicago, and I can guarantee you that's no place for a decent young woman." The threat hung in the air. Olivia had heard stories about those places. Factories where women worked 16-hour days in conditions that broke their bodies and spirits. She'd seen women return from such places, their eyes empty, their hands twisted from repetitive labor. Fear crystallized in her chest, cold and sharp despite the summer heat. "Who'll take her?" the auctioneer yelled again, his voice cracking with frustration. "Last call, gentlemen. Who'll take her?" The silence stretched impossibly long. Olivia felt tears burning behind her closed eyelids, refusing to let them fall, refusing to give these people the satisfaction of seeing her break completely. Then she heard it, the distinct sound of boots on wooden steps, steady and deliberate. Someone was walking up to the platform. She opened her eyes and saw him, a man she'd never seen before in Sioux Falls, though that wasn't surprising given how little she'd ventured into town in recent months. He was tall, probably close to 6 feet. With dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of a Dakota sky just before a storm. He couldn't have been much older than she was, perhaps 25 at most, but he carried himself with the kind of quiet confidence that came from knowing exactly who he was and what he stood for. His clothes were well worn but clean, the clothes of a working man who took pride in his appearance. A cowboy, she realized, noting the way he moved, the dust on his boots, the calluses visible on his hands. He looked directly at her, not through her or past her like the other men had done, but at her, as if he actually saw her as a person rather than a problem to be solved or an opportunity to be exploited. Something in his expression made her breath catch, a gentleness that seemed out of place in this brutal moment. Then he turned to the auctioneer, and his voice rang out clear and strong across the square. "I'll take her forever." The crowd erupted in confused murmuring. The auctioneer blinked, taken aback. "I beg your pardon?" The cowboy's jaw set firmly. "You heard me right. I'll pay her father's debts in full, all $300, but not for indentured servitude. I'm proposing marriage. If the lady agrees, of course. Olivia's mind reeled. Marriage. To a complete stranger? But even as the shock washed over her, she understood what he was doing. Indentured servitude meant years of backbreaking labor, with no guarantee of decent treatment, no legal protections, nothing but the promise that someday, if she survived, she'd be free again. But marriage, even to a stranger, meant legal standing, a home, a name that wasn't tied to debt and shame. The auctioneer sputtered. Now see here, that's highly irregular. This is a debt auction, not a matrimonial service. I don't see how it matters to you or the creditors, the cowboy replied calmly. The debts get paid either way, unless you've got some other reason for wanting to sell her off to the highest bidder. There was steel in his voice now, a challenge that made the auctioneer step back slightly. Well, I suppose if the young lady consents and the money is legitimate. The auctioneer looked to Olivia uncertainly. Every eye in the square turned to her. This was her choice, perhaps the only real choice she'd have. She could refuse, be sent off to servitude or the workhouse, or she could accept this stranger's inexplicable offer and become his wife. She studied his face, looking for any sign of cruelty or deception, but all she saw was an earnest sincerity that seemed almost naive in its purity. Why? She asked, her voice hoarse from hours of silent tears. Why would you do this? He climbed the last few steps onto the platform and stood before her, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his gray eyes. Because no person should be sold like property. Because my mother would rise from her grave and haunt me if I stood by and let this happen. And because something in my gut tells me it's the right thing to do. He paused, then added more softly, My name is Benjamin Wright. I've got a ranch about 10 miles north of here. Nothing fancy, but it's profitable and peaceful. I can promise you a roof over your head, food on the table, and respect. Nothing more unless you want it, nothing less than you deserve. Olivia felt something inside her chest loosen, some tight knot of fear beginning to unravel. Olivia Harper, she whispered. And yes, I'll marry you. The crowd exploded with reactions, some approving, others scandalized. But Benjamin ignored them all. He pulled out a leather pouch from his jacket and counted out $300 in bills and coins, placing them in the auctioneer's hands. That settles her father's debts. Now, get these ropes off her. The auctioneer fumbled with the bindings, and when Olivia's wrists were finally free, she rubbed at the angry red marks the rough hemp had left behind. Benjamin shrugged off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders, a gesture of protection that brought fresh tears to her eyes. We'll need a preacher, Benjamin said, his hand hovering near her elbow, but not quite touching, as if asking permission. Reverend Michaels is right over there, someone in the crowd called out, and an elderly man with kind eyes and silver hair pushed his way forward. I witnessed what just happened, Reverend Michaels said, his voice grave. Young man, do you understand the commitment you're making? Yes, sir, Benjamin replied without hesitation. I understand completely. The Reverend turned to Olivia. And you, Miss Harper, do you enter into this marriage of your own free will? Olivia thought about the word free and almost laughed at the bitter irony. But looking at Benjamin, at the genuine concern in his expression, she realized this was indeed her choice. Yes, she said firmly. I do. Right there on the auction platform, with half of Sioux Falls watching in amazement, Reverend Michaels performed a hasty but legal wedding ceremony. Benjamin produced a simple gold band from his pocket, a ring that he said had belonged to his grandmother, and slipped it onto Olivia's finger. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Benjamin didn't try to kiss her, simply nodded respectfully and offered his arm. Let's go home, he said quietly, and Olivia took his arm, letting him guide her down the platform steps and away from the worst day of her life. They walked through town in silence, Benjamin leading her to where his horse was hitched outside the general store. The animal was a beautiful chestnut mare with intelligent eyes and a glossy coat that spoke of excellent care. This is Copper, Benjamin said, stroking the mare's nose. She's gentle and steady. Do you ride? Not much, Olivia admitted. My father had a plow horse, but I never learned proper riding. That's all right, you can ride with me. He swung up into the saddle with easy grace and then reached down for her. Olivia hesitated only a moment before taking his hand and letting him pull her up behind him. She had to wrap her arms around his waist to keep her balance, and she felt him tense slightly at the contact, before relaxing. As they rode out of Sioux Falls, Olivia watched the town disappear behind them, that awful platform growing smaller and smaller until it was just a dark speck against the horizon. The prairie stretched out before them, endless and golden under the late afternoon sun. The rhythmic movement of the horse, the warmth of Benjamin's back against her cheek, the whisper of wind through the tall grass, it all felt surreal, like a dream she might wake from at any moment. "Are you all right?" Benjamin asked after they had ridden in silence for nearly half an hour. "I don't know," Olivia answered honestly. "I don't know what I am." "That's fair." He adjusted the reins, guiding Copper around a prairie dog hole. "This probably isn't how you imagine getting married." A laugh escaped her, sharp and slightly hysterical. "No, not exactly. For what it's worth, it wasn't how I imagined it either." There was humor in his voice, gentle and self-deprecating. "I always figured I'd court a woman proper, with flowers and Sunday dinners and long walks where we'd talk about our hopes and dreams. Then I'd ask her father's permission, and we'd have a church wedding with everyone we knew in attendance." "Why didn't you?" The question came out before Olivia could stop it. "I mean, you're clearly not destitute. You had $300 just sitting in your pocket. You're young and, well, not hard to look at. Surely there are women in Sioux Falls who would have married you the traditional way." She felt, rather than saw, his shrug. "Never found the right one, I suppose. I've been too focused on building up the ranch, proving I could make something of the land my father left me. And then today, I rode into town to pick up supplies and saw what was happening in the square." His voice hardened. "I've seen debt auctions before, seen what happens to people who get sold off like that. It never sits right with me, but I'd never been in a position to do anything about it. Today, I had the money and I had a choice. Seemed simple enough." "Nothing about this is simple," Olivia murmured, but she was grateful nonetheless. Whatever complications this impulsive marriage would bring, they had to be better than the alternative. The sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon when Benjamin's ranch came into view. It was modest but well-maintained, a 2-story wooden house with a wide porch and shutters painted a cheerful blue. Behind it stood a sturdy barn, a corral with several horses, and various outbuildings that spoke of a working ranch. Chickens scratched in a fenced yard, and Olivia could see a vegetable garden on the side of the house, the plants heavy with late summer produce. "It's not much," Benjamin said, and she could hear the pride beneath his modesty. "But it's all mine. Well, ours now, I suppose." "It's beautiful," Olivia said, and meant it. After weeks of watching her world crumble, after the horror of the auction platform, this place looked like a sanctuary. Benjamin helped her down from Copper and led the horse to the barn. Olivia followed, watching as he untacked the mare with practiced efficiency, his movements sure and economical. He worked in silence, and she found herself studying him in the dim barn light, trying to understand what kind of man impulsively marries a stranger to save her from servitude. "I should show you the house," Benjamin said when Copper was settled in her stall with fresh water and hay. He seemed suddenly nervous, running a hand through his dark hair. "I should tell you, I've been living alone here for 2 years since my father passed. My mother died when I was 17, and my sister Emma married a shopkeeper in Minneapolis last year. So the place might not be as clean as it should be, and I'm sure you'll want to rearrange things, which is fine. Whatever you want to do is fine." He was rambling, Olivia realized with surprise. This confident man, who'd stood up to an entire town square, was nervous about showing her his home. The realization made him seem more human, less like some incomprehensible savior, and more like a regular person who'd made an extraordinary choice and was now dealing with the consequences. "I'm sure it's fine," she assured him. The house was indeed a bit dusty and cluttered in the way of a bachelor's dwelling, but it was structurally sound and clearly built with care. The main room served as kitchen and living area, with a stone fireplace and comfortable furniture that looked handmade. Stairs led to the second floor, where Benjamin showed her 2 bedrooms. "This was my parents' room," he said, opening the door to a spacious chamber with a large bed, a wardrobe, and windows that overlooked the prairie. "You should take it. I've been sleeping in the smaller room, and I'll just continue doing that." Olivia turned to look at him, confused. "But we're married." "In name and law, yes." Benjamin met her eyes steadily. "But I meant what I said earlier. I can promise you respect and nothing more unless you want it. We're strangers, Olivia." Just because I put a ring on your finger doesn't mean I expect you to share my bed. That's not the kind of man I am. Something warm unfurled in Olivia's chest, a feeling she couldn't quite name. Relief certainly, but also a strange disappointment she didn't want to examine too closely. That's very decent of you. It's just human decency. Benjamin stepped back into the hallway. There's a washroom downstairs, and I'll heat some water if you want a bath. I imagine it's been a difficult day. The most difficult of my life, Olivia admitted. A bath sounds wonderful. Benjamin proved as good as his word, hauling water and heating it over the kitchen stove, while Olivia explored her new domain. She found sheets in a chest, curtains that needed mending, dishes that needed washing, and 100 other small tasks that would need doing. It was overwhelming, but in a different way than the morning's terror had been. This was the overwhelm of possibility, of a future that extended beyond the next hour's survival. The bath was blissful, washing away the sweat and fear and shame of the auction. Benjamin had left out a clean shirt of his for her to wear, since she had no other clothes, and though it hung on her like a dress, it was soft and smelled of soap and sunshine. When she emerged from the washroom, she found him in the kitchen, frying bacon and eggs with surprising competence. "I'm not much of a cook," he admitted, "but I can manage the basics. Are you hungry?" Olivia realized she hadn't eaten since the previous evening. Starving, actually. They sat at the wooden table and ate in companionable silence. The food was simple but good, and Olivia felt strength returning to her body with each bite. She studied Benjamin across the table, this stranger who was now her husband, and tried to reconcile all the contradictions he represented. "Can I ask you something?" she ventured. "Anything? Were you really just in town for supplies, or did you know about the auction?" Benjamin set down his fork and considered the question. "Bit of both, I suppose. I knew there was a debt auction scheduled, though I didn't know who was being sold. My father was sold into indentured servitude when he was 15, worked 5 years to pay off his family's debts. He used to tell me stories about it, about how dehumanizing it was, how it broke something inside him that never fully healed. He made me promise that if I ever had the means, I'd help people in that situation." He looked down at his plate. "So yes, I went to town for supplies, but I also went hoping I'd have the funds to intervene if necessary. But marriage, that seems extreme. The alternative seemed worse. If I'd just paid for your servitude, you'd be bound to work for me for years, basically a slave in all but name. I couldn't stomach that. Marriage gives you legal standing, property rights, freedom. If you decide tomorrow that you hate me and want to leave, at least you'd have options." Olivia shook her head in wonder. "You're either the kindest man I've ever met or the most foolish." "Probably both," Benjamin said with a slight smile, the first she'd seen from him. It transformed his face, making him look younger and more approachable. "My sister Emma would definitely vote for foolish." "Tell me about your family," Olivia requested, hungry for information about this man whose name she now shared. Benjamin leaned back in his chair, his expression softening. "My father, Samuel Wright, came from nothing. After he worked off his family's debts, he came west and claimed this land during the Homestead Act, built everything here with his own 2 hands. He married my mother, Sarah, when he was 23 and she was 19. They had me a year later, then Emma 2 years after that. It was a good life, hard but happy. My mother died of pneumonia when I was 17, and my father never really recovered. He passed 2 years ago, heart just gave out. Emma says he died of a broken heart, and I believe it. They loved each other something fierce." "That's beautiful," Olivia said softly. "My parents were like that too. When my mother died, my father tried to keep going for my sake, but he was just going through the motions. Sometimes I think the fever was almost a relief for him, a chance to be with her again." "I'm sorry for your loss." Benjamin's voice was gentle. "Both of them." "Thank you." Olivia traced the rim of her cup with one finger. "It's strange, isn't it? We're both orphans, both alone in the world." "Not alone anymore," Benjamin pointed out. "For better or worse, we've got each other now." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication and possibility. Olivia felt exhaustion crashing over her suddenly, the events of the day finally catching up with her body. She stifled a yawn, and Benjamin immediately stood. "You're dead on your feet. Come on, let's get you to bed." He showed her upstairs again, and this time Olivia noticed details she'd missed before. The bedroom was clearly his mother's touch, with delicate curtains and a handmade quilt in shades of blue and cream. There was a photograph on the dresser showing a young couple, the man's arm around the woman's waist, both smiling at the camera with such obvious joy that it made Olivia's heart ache. "That's them," Benjamin said, following her gaze. "Taken on their 10th anniversary. I was 12, and I remember being amazed that people could still look at each other like that after a decade of marriage. They look very happy." They were. He moved toward the door. "I'm right across the hall if you need anything. And Olivia, try not to worry about tomorrow. We'll figure everything out as we go." After he left, Olivia changed into the shirt he'd given her and slipped between the sheets. The bed was comfortable, the pillows soft, and through the open window she could hear the nighttime sounds of the prairie, crickets singing, an owl hooting in the distance, the whisper of wind through grass. She should have been too anxious to sleep, her mind spinning with all the changes and uncertainties. But instead, she felt a strange peace settling over her. This morning, she'd been alone and terrified, facing a future of servitude or worse. Tonight, she was married to a kind stranger, lying in a comfortable bed in a house that was now legally hers as much as his. It wasn't the life she'd planned, wasn't the romantic story she'd dreamed of as a girl, but it was infinitely better than where she'd been headed. She touched the gold band on her finger, Benjamin's grandmother's ring, and wondered what the old woman would think of how her ring had been bestowed. Then, with that thought drifting through her mind, Olivia Harper Wright fell into the deepest sleep she'd had in months. Morning came bright and early, sunlight streaming through the curtains and birdsong filtering through the window. Olivia woke disoriented for a moment before memory came flooding back. She was married. She was at Benjamin's ranch. Yesterday had actually happened. She rose and dressed in the same clothes from the day before, her only possessions in the world. It was a sobering thought, but she pushed it aside and made her way downstairs, following the smell of coffee and the sound of someone moving around in the kitchen. Benjamin was at the stove again, this time making pancakes with more confidence than he'd shown the previous evening. He looked up when she entered and gave her that small smile again. "Morning. Did you sleep all right?" "Better than I have in weeks, actually." Olivia poured herself a cup of coffee and leaned against the counter. "Thank you for giving me the better bedroom." "It's only right." He flipped a pancake with practiced ease. "I was thinking today we could ride into town and get you some proper clothes and whatever else you need. I know you lost everything, and you can't keep wearing my shirts, though I have to say you wear them better than I do." Was he flirting with her? Olivia felt heat creep into her cheeks and hid behind her coffee cup. "That's kind of you, but $300 is already more than enough money to spend on my account." "Olivia, you're my wife now. What's mine is yours. That's how marriage works. Besides, the ranch does well enough that we're not going to go hungry over a few dresses and necessities." He plated the pancakes and brought them to the table, along with butter and syrup. "Plus, I need to introduce you to people properly. Let everyone know we're legally married. Otherwise, there'll be talk." "There's already gonna be talk. We got married on an auction platform in front of half the town." "Fair point." Benjamin sat across from her. "But we can at least try to make the best of it. Present ourselves as a normal married couple starting their life together." Normal. There was nothing normal about their situation, but Olivia understood what he was trying to do. He was giving her dignity, respectability, a chance to hold her head high despite yesterday's humiliation. It was another kindness in a growing list of them. "All right," she agreed, "but I'll need to contribute somehow. I can't just take from you without giving back." "You're already contributing just by being here. But if you want to help with the ranch work, I certainly won't say no. There's plenty to do, and I've been managing alone for long enough that I'm behind on half a dozen projects." They ate breakfast and discussed the day's plans. Benjamin would do the morning chores, feeding and watering the livestock, while Olivia tidied the house and made a list of supplies they'd need. Then they'd ride to town together, make their purchases, and return before evening. It was a simple plan, domestic and ordinary, and Olivia found comfort in its normalcy. She threw herself into cleaning with vigor, scrubbing dishes and sweeping floors and shaking out rugs until the house gleamed. She found herself humming as she worked, surprising herself with the lightness in her chest. Was this what hope felt like? She'd almost forgotten. When Benjamin came in from the barn, he stopped short and stared. "Did you clean the entire house in 2 hours?" "Most of it." Olivia wiped her hands on a dish towel. There's still the upstairs to do, but I'll tackle that tomorrow. I'd forgotten how satisfying good, honest work can be when you're doing it for yourself rather than under threat. Something flickered across Benjamin's face, an emotion too quick for her to identify. Right, well, I'm ready to head to town if you are. The ride to Sioux Falls was more pleasant in daylight, with Olivia sitting behind Benjamin on copper and the prairie stretching golden and green around them. They talked as they rode, sharing small details about their lives. Benjamin told her about the ranch, about the various animals and the crops he was trying to cultivate. Olivia told him about her dreams of teaching, about the books she'd loved as a child, and the education her mother had insisted she receive despite their poverty. You could still teach, Benjamin said thoughtfully. There's a schoolhouse in town, but they're always looking for qualified teachers. Miss Henderson has been handling it alone for 3 years now, and she's getting on in age. That would be wonderful, Olivia breathed, not daring to hope too much. But would they accept me, given the circumstances of our marriage? We'll make them accept you. You're educated, you're capable, and you deserve the chance to pursue your dreams. That's not going to change just because of how we met. Riding into Sioux Falls was easier the second time, though Olivia still felt eyes on her as they passed through the streets. Benjamin seemed oblivious to the stares, or perhaps he just didn't care. He hitched Copper outside the general store and offered Olivia his arm with perfect courtesy, as if they were any other married couple running errands together. Inside, the proprietor's wife, Mrs. Nelson, looked up from her counter with barely concealed curiosity. Mr. Wright, and Mrs. Wright, I suppose I should say. Congratulations on your marriage. Thank you, Benjamin said smoothly. We'll need to purchase some clothes and supplies for my wife. Perhaps you could help her with the ladies' items while I gather the rest. Mrs. Nelson was clearly bursting with questions, but Benjamin's polite firmness gave her little opportunity to pry. She led Olivia to the back of the store, where ready-made dresses hung alongside bolts of fabric. Now then, dear, what did you have in mind? For the next hour, Olivia allowed herself to be outfitted properly. 2 everyday dresses in practical cotton, 1 nicer dress for church, undergarments, a proper nightgown, a warm shawl, and a pair of sturdy boots. Mrs. Nelson also insisted on adding a bonnet and gloves, declaring that no respectable ranch wife should be without them. Olivia protested the expense until Benjamin appeared with his arms full of other supplies and simply nodded his approval. Whatever she needs, Mrs. Nelson, and add some of that lavender soap my mother used to like, if you still carry it. Of course, Mr. Wright. Mrs. Nelson's expression softened slightly. Your mother was a lovely woman. She'd be proud of what you did yesterday, standing up like that. Benjamin's ears reddened slightly, but he accepted the compliment with grace. They loaded their purchases onto Copper and made one more stop at the bank, where Benjamin formally added Olivia's name to his accounts. The banker, Mr. Thornton, raised his eyebrows but processed the paperwork without comment. As they prepared to leave town, they ran into Reverend Michaels outside the church. The elderly minister waved them over with a gentle smile. Mr. and Mrs. Wright, I was hoping I might see you again soon. Reverend, Benjamin greeted him respectfully. I wanted to check on you both, make sure you're doing all right after yesterday's unusual circumstances. Reverend Michaels looked between them with kind but searching eyes. Marriage is a sacred covenant, regardless of how it comes about. But I'd be remiss in my duties if I didn't offer you both counsel and support. That's very kind of you, Olivia said, genuinely touched. We're managing quite well, actually. I'm glad to hear it. The Reverend paused, choosing his words carefully. I've been thinking about what happened, about the practice of debt auctions in general. It sits poorly with me, the idea of selling human beings to satisfy monetary obligations. I plan to speak with the town council about finding alternative solutions for those facing such dire circumstances. That would be a good thing, Benjamin said firmly. No one should have to endure what my wife nearly did. Hearing Benjamin refer to her as his wife sent a strange flutter through Olivia's stomach. It was still so new, this identity, this connection to another person. Reverend Michaels nodded approvingly. You're a good man, Benjamin Wright. Your parents raised you right. He turned to Olivia. And you, my dear, I hope you'll consider joining our congregation. We have a women's group that meets every Wednesday, and I think you'd find friendship there. I'd like that very much, Olivia replied, meaning it. The idea of having friends again, of being part of a community rather than an outcast, was almost too wonderful to contemplate. They said their goodbyes and headed back to the ranch. The ride home felt different from the ride out, more comfortable somehow. Olivia found herself relaxing against Benjamin's back, noticing small things about him, the way he sat so easily in the saddle, the gentle way he spoke to Copper, the unconscious habit he had of humming tunelessly when he was content. Back at the ranch, Olivia changed into one of her new dresses, marveling at the simple luxury of having clean clothes that actually fit. She spent the afternoon organizing her new belongings and exploring the property more thoroughly, while Benjamin worked on repairing fence posts in the far pasture. The vegetable garden was larger than she'd initially realized, with tomatoes, beans, squash, and herbs all growing in somewhat haphazard abundance. Clearly, Benjamin had planted everything, but hadn't had time to maintain it properly. Olivia rolled up her sleeves and set to work weeding and pruning, losing herself in the peaceful rhythm of the work. She was elbow-deep in tomato plants when Benjamin found her at sunset. "There you are. I was starting to wonder if you'd run off." "Hardly. I was just getting acquainted with the garden. You've got good instincts for planting, but these vegetables are desperate for attention." Benjamin laughed, a full, genuine sound that lit up his whole face. "I planted what my mother used to grow, but I'm afraid I don't have her green thumb. Honestly, I'm glad you found it. Maybe now things will actually thrive instead of barely surviving." They walked back to the house together, their shoulders almost touching, and Olivia felt something shift between them. Not romance, not yet, but the beginning of real companionship. They were getting to know each other, finding their rhythm, learning how to exist in the same space. Over dinner, Benjamin asked her more about her teaching aspirations. "What would you teach if you had the choice?" "Everything," Olivia said passionately. "Reading and writing, of course, but also mathematics, history, geography. I'd want to show children that the world is bigger and more wonderful than they might imagine, that education is the key to choosing their own futures." "You light up when you talk about it," Benjamin observed, his eyes warm. "It's clear this is what you're meant to do." "I hope I get the chance." Olivia traced patterns on the tablecloth with her finger. "Though I suppose I should focus on settling in here first, learning how to be a ranch wife." "You can be both. My mother was. She helped run the ranch and still found time to tutor Emma and me at home, even taught a few neighbor children when they asked." Benjamin reached across the table and squeezed her hand briefly, the first time he'd voluntarily touched her since their marriage. "You don't have to give up your dreams just because circumstances changed. If anything, I want to help you achieve them." That night, lying in bed with the window open to the cool prairie air, Olivia thought about dreams and choices and the strange paths life could take. 2 days ago, she'd had no future to speak of. Now she had a home, a husband who respected her, and the possibility of pursuing her deepest ambitions. It wasn't the romantic fairy tale she'd imagined as a girl, but perhaps it was something better, a real partnership built on mutual respect and shared values. The days settled into a pattern. Benjamin would rise early to handle the livestock while Olivia made breakfast. They'd eat together, discussing the day's tasks, and then separate to their respective work. Olivia threw herself into managing the household, transforming the bachelor's ranch into a proper home. She mended curtains, organized storage, put up preserves from the abundant garden, and slowly made the space reflect both of them, rather than just Benjamin alone. In the afternoons, they'd often work together on larger projects. Olivia proved surprisingly handy with tools, able to hold boards steady while Benjamin hammered or hand him supplies while he made repairs. They talked constantly as they worked, sharing stories and opinions and slowly building a foundation of friendship. A week after their marriage, Benjamin surprised her by setting up a small desk in the corner of the main room. "I thought you might like a space to write or read," he explained, looking almost shy. "I know you don't have many books yet, but I asked Emma to send some of Mother's collection. They should arrive in a few weeks." Olivia was moved nearly to tears by his thoughtfulness. "Thank you, Benjamin. This means more than you know." "You're welcome to call me Ben," he offered. "Most people do." "Ben," she tested the name. "I like it. It suits you better than Benjamin, somehow less formal. What about you? Do you have a nickname?" "My mother used to call me Liv, but no one's called me that in years." "Liv?" Ben repeated and smiled. "Would you like me to use it?" "Yes," Olivia said, surprising herself. "Yes, I would." It was a small thing, this exchange of nicknames, but it felt significant. They were no longer strangers forced together by circumstance, but two people actively choosing to know each other, to build something together. Sunday came, and they dressed in their best clothes to attend church together. Olivia wore her new dress and bonnet, and Ben put on a clean shirt and jacket that made him look even more handsome than usual. As they walked into the church, Olivia felt every eye in the congregation turned toward them. She lifted her chin and kept her hand steady on Ben's arm, refusing to show shame or embarrassment. Reverend Michaels welcomed them warmly from the pulpit, introducing them as newlyweds and encouraging the congregation to offer their support. The service passed in a blur of hymns and prayers, and afterward, several women approached Olivia with cautious friendliness. "Mrs. Wright, I'm Helen Porter," said a woman around Olivia's age with kind eyes and a ready smile. "I wanted to invite you to our Wednesday women's meeting. We sew and share recipes and generally escape our husbands for a few hours." "I'd love to come," Olivia replied, grateful for the overture. Another woman, older and more severe-looking, studied Olivia critically. "You're the girl from the auction, aren't you? The one whose father left her in debt?" Before Olivia could respond, Ben stepped forward, his voice cold. "She's my wife, Mrs. Crawford, and I'd thank you to show her the respect that position deserves." Mrs. Crawford sniffed, but backed down in the face of Ben's obvious displeasure. Helen Porter rolled her eyes sympathetically and linked her arm through Olivia's. "Don't mind her. She's critical of everyone. Come meet some of the nicer ladies." By the time they left church, Olivia had received 3 more invitations to the Wednesday meeting and several genuine expressions of welcome. On the ride home, Ben asked how she was feeling. "Better than I expected," Olivia admitted. "I thought everyone would judge me, but most people seem willing to accept me as your wife rather than focusing on how we met." "That's because I'm a respected member of the community," Ben said matter-of-factly. "Not bragging, just stating fact. My father worked hard to build a good name, and I've maintained it. That carries weight, and it extends to you now. Thank you for defending me to Mrs. Crawford." "Always," Ben said simply. "You're my wife. No one gets to disrespect you, not while I'm around." The possessiveness in his tone sent an unexpected thrill through Olivia. She tightened her arms around his waist slightly and rested her cheek against his shoulder, feeling his breath catch at the contact. They rode the rest of the way home in charged silence, something unspoken building between them. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple, Ben finally broke the comfortable quiet. "I need to tell you something, Liv." Olivia's heart skipped. The seriousness in his tone made her nervous. "What is it?" "I've been thinking about our arrangement, about what I promised you that first day. I said you'd have respect and nothing more, unless you wanted it. And I've tried to honor that. But I need you to know that I'm starting to feel things I didn't expect." He turned to look at her, his gray eyes intense. "I'm starting to care for you, Liv. Not just as someone I'm responsible for, but as a woman I genuinely admire and enjoy being around. And I wanted to be honest about that because it doesn't seem fair to keep it hidden." Olivia's breath caught in her throat. She'd been feeling the pull between them too, had noticed the way her heart raced when he smiled at her, the way she looked forward to their conversations, the way she'd started watching him when he worked and admiring the strength in his hands and the kindness in his eyes. "I'm starting to feel things too," she admitted softly. "I didn't think I would, or at least not so quickly. But you've been so good to me, Ben, so patient and kind and respectful. How could I not develop feelings for you?" Ben reached over and took her hand, his calloused fingers warm against hers. "We can take this as slowly as you need. There's no rush. We've got the rest of our lives to figure out what this is between us." "What if I don't want to take it slowly?" The words escaped before Olivia could second-guess them. "What if I'm tired of living in separate rooms and maintaining this polite distance? We're married, Ben. Maybe it's time we actually acted like it." Ben's eyes darkened, and he lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "Are you sure? I don't want you to feel pressured." "I'm sure." Olivia's heart was racing, but her voice was steady. "I want this. I want us." Ben stood and pulled her to her feet, cradling her face in his hands. "Then let me court you properly first. Let me take you to the summer dance next weekend, walk with you by the creek, bring you wildflowers, and make you laugh. You deserve romance, Liv, even if we did everything backward." Tears pricked at Olivia's eyes, but they were happy tears. You're too good to be true, you know that? Not true. I'm just a man who's falling in love with his wife and wants to do right by her. He leaned down and pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. Now come on, let's go inside before the mosquitoes eat us alive. True to his word, Ben began courting her in earnest. The next morning, Olivia woke to find a bouquet of wildflowers on the kitchen table with a note in Ben's bold handwriting. Beautiful flowers for a beautiful woman. Good morning, Liv. He'd started bringing her small gifts throughout the day. A smooth river stone he found while checking the fence line, a perfect robin's egg shell, a ribbon he'd purchased in town. He'd tell her stories about his childhood while they worked, making her laugh with tales of the trouble he and Emma had gotten into. He'd take her hand when they walked together, or brush her hair back from her face when the wind blew it loose. Wednesday came, and Olivia attended the women's meeting as promised. Helen Porter and 3 other young wives welcomed her warmly, and they spent the afternoon sewing and chatting. Olivia learned that Helen had been married for 3 years and had a 1-year-old son. Another woman, Margaret, was newly pregnant with her first child. They talked about their husbands, their homes, their dreams and fears with the easy intimacy of women who understood each other's lives. When Olivia mentioned that Ben was courting her despite them already being married, the women sighed in unison. "That's so romantic," Margaret said wistfully. "My husband proposed with a ring made from braided grass and called it good enough." "At least yours proposed," another woman, Sarah, laughed. "Mine just asked if I wanted to share his claim and figured that was marriage enough." Helen smiled at Olivia warmly. "You're lucky to have Benjamin Wright. He's always been one of the good ones. Even when you were at your lowest, he saw your worth. That's rare." Olivia felt a swell of pride and affection. "I know. I'm beginning to realize just how lucky I am." Saturday arrived, bringing with it the summer dance that Ben had promised. Olivia wore her nice dress, and Ben appeared in clean trousers and a shirt that made his eyes look like storm clouds. He'd even shaved and combed his hair with care, looking more polished than she'd ever seen him. "You look beautiful," he said simply, offering his arm. "You clean up pretty well yourself," Olivia replied with a smile. The dance was held in a large barn on the edge of town, lit with lanterns and already filled with people when they arrived. A small band played lively tunes in one corner, while couples spun across the floor. Ben led Olivia to the refreshment table first, getting her a cup of punch and introducing her to more people than she could possibly remember. When the music slowed to a waltz, Ben held out his hand. "May I have this dance, Mrs. Wright?" "You may, Mr. Wright." Ben pulled her into his arms, one hand at her waist and the other clasping hers, and they began to move across the floor. He was a better dancer than Olivia expected, leading her confidently through the steps. She found herself relaxing into his embrace, following his lead naturally. "You never told me you could dance," she said, smiling up at him. "You never asked. My mother insisted Emma and I both learn, said it was part of being civilized, even on the frontier." They danced 3 more dances, each one bringing them closer together until Olivia was pressed against Ben's chest, her head fitting perfectly under his chin. She could feel his heartbeat, strong and steady, and smell the soap he'd used and something else underneath that was purely him. "Liv," he murmured into her hair, "I need to tell you something." "What is it?" "I love you. I know it's fast. I know we've barely known each other 2 weeks, but I can't keep it in anymore. I love you." Olivia pulled back just enough to look up at his face, seeing the vulnerability there, the fear of rejection. But there was no need for fear. "I love you too, Ben. I think I started falling for you the moment you stepped onto that platform." Ben's face broke into the widest smile she'd ever seen from him. Then, right there on the dance floor with half of Sioux Falls watching, he cupped her face in his hands and kissed her. It was gentle and sweet and full of promise, and Olivia felt her entire world shift on its axis. When they finally broke apart, applause erupted around them. Olivia blushed furiously, but Ben just laughed and pulled her close, swaying to the music as if nothing else mattered but the 2 of them. They stayed at the dance until late, but both were eager to get home. The ride back to the ranch seemed to take forever, the tension between them crackling like lightning. When they finally arrived, Ben helped Olivia down from Copper, and then, without warning, swept her into his arms. "What are you doing?" she gasped, laughing. "Carrying my bride over the threshold. I know we did everything else out of order, but I'll be damned if I skip this tradition." He carried her up the porch steps and through the door, not setting her down until they were inside with the door closed behind them. In the lamplight, they looked at each other, the weight of the moment heavy between them. This was it, the shift from platonic arrangement to real marriage. Olivia's hands trembled slightly as she reached up to touch Ben's face, tracing the strong line of his jaw. "Are you sure?" Ben asked one more time. "I've never been more sure of anything," Olivia whispered and kissed him. They made their way upstairs together, and that night, their marriage became real in every sense of the word. Ben was gentle and patient, taking his time, making sure Olivia felt cherished and safe. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the big bed that had been his parents', and Olivia felt a completeness she'd never known before. "I can't believe this is my life now," she murmured against Ben's chest. 4 weeks ago, I was alone and terrified. Now I'm here with you, happy and loved." Ben pressed a kiss to the top of her head. 4 weeks ago, I was a lonely bachelor who'd resigned himself to spending his life alone. Now, I've got the most wonderful wife a man could ask for. Funny how things work out. It's more than funny, it's miraculous. Olivia propped herself up on one elbow to look at him. "Thank you, Ben, for everything. For saving me, for respecting me, for loving me. Thank you for taking a chance on me, for seeing past the strange circumstances and giving us a real chance." He pulled her back down against him, wrapping his arms securely around her. "I promise I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret saying yes on that platform." "I already know I won't," Olivia said with absolute certainty, and fell asleep in her husband's arms. The weeks that followed were blissful. Ben and Olivia settled into their marriage with ease, finding joy in both the passion and the everyday companionship. They worked side by side during the day and fell into each other's arms at night, learning each other's bodies and hearts with equal dedication. In late September, Olivia walked into town and met with Miss Henderson at the schoolhouse. The elderly teacher welcomed her warmly, and, after a lengthy conversation about education and teaching methods, offered Olivia a position as assistant teacher starting in the new year. "I'm not getting any younger," Miss Henderson admitted, "and the class sizes keep growing. I could use help, especially from someone as passionate and knowledgeable as you." Olivia accepted with tears of joy and practically ran home to tell Ben. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing at her excitement. "I knew you'd get it. How could they not want you?" Autumn painted the prairie in golds and reds, and Ben and Olivia worked together to prepare the ranch for winter. They harvested the last of the garden, put up preserves, stacked firewood, and made sure all the buildings were secure. Helen Porter became a close friend, visiting often with her son and staying for tea and conversation. In October, Olivia realized she was pregnant. She told Ben on a crisp morning as they watched the sun rise from their porch, and the joy on his face made her cry happy tears. "A baby," he breathed, placing his hand on her still flat stomach. "Our baby." "Are you happy?" Olivia asked, though she could clearly see that he was. Happy doesn't begin to cover it. Thrilled, terrified, grateful, amazed, all of those and more. He pulled her into his arms. "I love you so much, Liv. Thank you for making all my dreams come true." When Olivia told Miss Henderson about the pregnancy, the older teacher immediately began making plans. "You'll teach through the fall semester, and then we'll reassess depending on how you're feeling. After the baby comes, you can bring the little one to school with you if you'd like. I've seen it done before." The thought of being able to continue teaching even after becoming a mother filled Olivia with gratitude. She was building the exact life she'd always wanted, just in a different order than she'd expected. Winter came, and Ben made sure Olivia stayed warm and comfortable. He'd pile extra blankets on the bed, make sure she always had tea, and fuss over her constantly until she'd laugh and push him away playfully. Christmas arrived, and Ben surprised her with books, beautiful leather-bound volumes that must have cost a small fortune. "You said you wanted to build a library," he explained. "This is a start." Olivia's gift to him was a quilt she'd secretly been working on, pieced together from scraps of his father's old shirts and his mother's dresses that Emma had sent. When Ben realized what it was, he couldn't speak for several minutes, just held the quilt and traced the familiar fabrics with his fingers. "It's perfect," he finally managed. "Having them here with us like this, it's perfect." In January, a letter arrived from Emma announcing that she and her husband would visit in the spring to meet Olivia and see the ranch. Ben was thrilled at the prospect of seeing his sister again, and Olivia looked forward to meeting the woman who'd grown up in this house and clearly meant so much to her husband. Olivia began teaching in the new year, assisting Miss Henderson with the growing classroom of children. She discovered she was good at it, had a natural ability to explain difficult concepts and make learning engaging. The children adored her, and their parents praised her methods. Miss Henderson often joked that she might retire sooner than planned if Olivia kept making her look bad by comparison. As Olivia's pregnancy advanced, Ben became even more protective. He insisted on driving her to and from school in the wagon, wouldn't let her lift anything heavy, and generally treated her like she was made of glass. Olivia found it both annoying and endearing, scolding him for being overprotective while secretly loving how much he cared. In early April, when the prairie was just beginning to turn green again, Emma and her husband Thomas arrived. Emma was a petite woman with dark hair and Ben's same gray eyes, and she embraced Olivia like a long-lost sister. "I can't believe my brother got married without telling me first," she scolded good-naturedly. "When I got his letter explaining everything, I thought he'd lost his mind. But now that I've met you, I understand completely. You're perfect for him." Thomas was quieter but equally friendly, a bookish man who'd inherited his father's shop and loved nothing more than talking about literature. He and Olivia hit it off immediately, discussing their favorite authors while Emma and Ben caught up on family news. Emma pulled Olivia aside one afternoon while the men were working in the barn. "I need to thank you," she said seriously. "Ben was so lonely after father died, and I moved away. He threw himself into work and never let himself want anything more. Then you came into his life, and suddenly he's happy again. He's himself again. That's because of you." "He saved me first," Olivia replied. "I owe him everything." "That's not how he sees it. He says you saved each other." Emma squeezed Olivia's hand. "I'm so glad you're part of our family now." Emma and Thomas stayed for 2 weeks, and by the time they left, Olivia felt like she'd known them forever. Emma made her promise to write regularly and to send word immediately when the baby arrived. In late May, Olivia went into labor. Ben, who delivered countless calves and foals, turned into a nervous wreck when it came to his own wife. Helen Porter came to help, along with the midwife Mrs. Schmidt, and they banished Ben from the bedroom while Olivia labored. It was a long night, but when dawn broke, Olivia delivered a healthy baby boy. Ben was allowed back in to meet his son, and Olivia would never forget the look on his face when he held the tiny bundle for the first time. "He's perfect," Ben whispered, tears streaming down his face. "You're perfect. I can't believe this is real." They named him Samuel Benjamin Wright, after Ben's father, and called him Sam. He was a good baby, content and curious, with dark hair like his father and hazel eyes that might eventually turn gold like his mother's. Olivia took the rest of the school year off to recover and bond with Sam, but by September, she was back in the classroom with the baby in a basket beside her desk. The children were fascinated by Sam, and Olivia used his presence to teach them about responsibility and caring for others. Miss Henderson officially retired at the end of that school year, leaving Olivia as the head teacher. The town built a small addition onto the schoolhouse so that Sam would have his own space as he grew older, and Olivia hired a young assistant to help manage the growing number of students. Life settled into a beautiful rhythm. Ben would work the ranch, Olivia would teach, and they'd come together in the evenings as a family. Sam grew quickly, a bright and curious child who loved animals and books equally. When he was 2, Olivia became pregnant again, and in the summer of 1882, she gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah, after Ben's mother. Sarah was different from Sam, fussy and demanding, but she had her grandmother's gentle spirit. She'd calm instantly when Ben sang to her, the same lullabies his mother had sung to him. Watching her big, strong husband cradling their tiny daughter and singing in his rumbling voice never failed to make Olivia's heart swell with love. As the children grew, so did the ranch. Ben expanded the operation, hiring a couple of hands to help with the increased workload. The ranch became known throughout Dakota Territory for the quality of its horses, and Ben developed a reputation as an honest dealer and skilled trainer. Olivia continued teaching, and eventually, the town built a proper schoolhouse with 2 classrooms. She took on more advanced students while her assistant handled the younger children. Former students would come back to visit, telling her how her teaching had inspired them to pursue education or careers they'd never thought possible. In 1885, when Sam was 6 and Sarah was 3, Olivia discovered she was pregnant again. This time, she gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl they named Emma Rose and Jacob Thomas after Ben's sister and brother-in-law. The twins were identical in appearance but opposite in temperament. Emma, outgoing and adventurous, while Jacob was quiet and thoughtful. The house expanded to accommodate the growing family. Ben added another bedroom and enlarged the kitchen, building the additions with his own hands just as his father had built the original house. Emma visited every summer, and her children and Ben's became close cousins despite the distance between them. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Ben took Olivia back to Sioux Falls for a special dinner at the hotel restaurant. As they ate, they talked about everything that had happened since that fateful day on the auction platform. "Do you ever think about what your life would have been like if I hadn't been in town that day?" Ben asked, his hand covering hers on the table. "Sometimes," Olivia admitted, "but I try not to dwell on it. The alternatives were all terrible, and I got incredibly lucky instead. I'm the lucky one. I went to town for fence posts and came home with the love of my life." Ben lifted her hand to his lips. "Best $300 I ever spent." Olivia laughed. "You'd better not let the children hear you say that. They'll think you bought me." "In a way, I suppose I did. But you bought me right back with your courage and your kindness and your love." His expression grew serious. "I meant what I said that day, Liv. I took you forever, and I'll keep you forever. Nothing will ever change that." "Forever," Olivia echoed, tears in her eyes. "I love you, Benjamin Wright." "I love you too, Olivia Wright. Always have, always will." The years continued to pass in a blur of happiness. Sam grew into a strong young man who loved the ranch and planned to take it over from his father someday. Sarah inherited her mother's love of teaching and her grandmother's gentle nature. The twins were inseparable, always getting into mischief together, but fiercely loyal to each other and their siblings. Olivia's school became one of the best in the region, with students coming from surrounding areas to learn from the legendary Mrs. Wright. She wrote articles about education that were published in newspapers across the territory. And when South Dakota achieved statehood in 1889, Olivia was invited to speak at the celebration about the importance of education in building a strong state. Ben's ranch continued to thrive, and he became a leader in the community, serving on the town council and helping to establish a bank that offered fair lending practices so that no one else would face what Olivia's father had. Together, Ben and Olivia became pillars of Sioux Falls society, respected and loved by all who knew them. In 1893, on their 15th anniversary, Ben surprised Olivia with a trip to Minneapolis to visit Emma. While there, they had a professional photograph taken, the kind with a formal studio background and perfect lighting. In the photograph, Ben sits in a chair with Olivia standing beside him, her hand on his shoulder. They're both smiling, and anyone who looked at the image could see the love and contentment radiating from them. When they returned home, they hung the photograph in the parlor next to the one of Ben's parents. Olivia would sometimes stand between the two images and marvel at the legacy of love in the Wright family, at how she'd become part of that legacy in the most unexpected way. The children grew and eventually began lives of their own. Sam married a local girl named Catherine in 1895 and built a house on the far end of the ranch property. Sarah trained as a teacher under her mother's guidance and eventually took over the school when Olivia decided to retire in 1898. The twins went off to university together, Emma studying medicine and Jacob studying law, both determined to make their marks on the world. As Ben and Olivia entered their later years, they found themselves alone in the big house again, their children grown and making their own ways. But they weren't lonely. They had each other, and that had always been enough. On a warm evening in 1903, 25 years after that fateful auction, Ben and Olivia sat on their porch watching the sunset, just as they'd done countless times before. Ben's hair was silver now, and Olivia's honey-colored locks had threads of white running through them. But they still held hands like young lovers. "Do you remember what you said to me on this porch all those years ago?" Ben asked suddenly. Olivia smiled. "I've said a lot of things to you on this porch over the years. Which time are you thinking of?" "That first time, when I told you I was starting to have feelings for you. You said you were tired of living in separate rooms and maintaining polite distance." "I remember. I was terrified saying it, worried you'd think I was being too forward. I thought you were being brave. You always have been, from that very first day when you stood on that platform with your head held high despite everything. Ben turned to look at her, his gray eyes still as intense as they had been when he was young. 25 years, Liv. A quarter century of marriage, and I love you more now than I did then. I love you too, Olivia replied, leaning her head on his shoulder. Thank you for stepping forward that day. Thank you for taking me forever. Best decision I ever made. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun painted the sky in brilliant colors, the same sky that had witnessed their unusual beginning and now watched over their enduring love. In the distance, they could hear Sam and Catherine's children playing in the yard of their house, the next generation of Wrights growing up on this land that meant so much to their family. Life had been good to them, better than either could have hoped for on that terrible, wonderful day when an auctioneer had yelled, "Who'll take her?" and a cowboy had stepped forward to answer, "I'll take her forever." Those words had changed everything, had set them both on a path neither could have anticipated, but both were grateful for every single day. As darkness fell and stars began to appear in the vast Dakota sky, Ben and Olivia rose and went inside together, hand in hand, just as they'd done for 25 years and would continue to do for all the years to come. Their love story hadn't started conventionally, but it had become something extraordinary, a testament to the power of compassion, the beauty of unexpected blessings, and the enduring strength of two people who'd chosen each other against all odds. In 1908, Ben and Olivia celebrated their 30th anniversary with all 4 children and their families gathered at the ranch. Sam and Catherine had given them 3 grandchildren. Sarah had married a teacher named David and had 2 children of their own. Emma had become a doctor in Chicago and married a fellow physician, and Jacob had established a successful law practice in Pierre and recently gotten engaged. The house overflowed with love and laughter, with children running through the rooms and adults sharing stories and memories. After dinner, Ben stood to make a toast, looking around at the faces of the family he and Olivia had created together. 30 years ago, he began, his voice still strong despite his 60 years. I walked into Sioux Falls to buy fence posts and came home with a wife instead. It was the most impulsive thing I'd ever done, and everyone thought I was crazy. Maybe I was. He looked at Olivia, and his eyes softened. But sometimes crazy is exactly what the world needs. Sometimes you have to step forward when everyone else steps back. Sometimes you have to take a chance on something that makes no logical sense but feels absolutely right in your heart. He raised his glass. To my wife, my partner, my best friend, to the woman who stood on that platform with courage and dignity and gave me the privilege of loving her. To 30 more years and beyond, if God grants them. To forever. To forever? Everyone echoed, and Olivia had to wipe tears from her eyes. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed and the house was quiet, Olivia found Ben on the porch again, their favorite spot, looking out over the land they'd built a life on together. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, settling beside him. "Everything. Nothing. How lucky I am." He put his arm around her and pulled her close. "I was just remembering something my father told me before he died. He said that the greatest legacy a man can leave isn't land or money, or even his name. It's love. The love he gave and the love he inspired in others. Your father was a wise man. He'd be proud of what we've built here, I think. Not just the ranch, but the family, the life, the love." Ben kissed the top of her head. "And he'd be proud of you, Liv. I know he would. I wish I could have known him. And your mother. They know you somehow. I truly believe that. And they love you as much as I do." Ben's voice grew thick with emotion. "You've given me everything I could have ever wanted, Liv. A home full of love, children who make me proud every single day, a life of purpose and meaning. You've made me the man I always hoped to be." "We made each other," Olivia corrected gently. "That's what marriage is supposed to be, isn't it? 2 people helping each other become the best versions of themselves. Then we've succeeded beyond all measure." They stayed on the porch until the moon rose high and bright, illuminating the prairie in silver light. Inside the house, their family slept peacefully, secure in the love that Ben and Olivia had built and nurtured for 3 decades. And outside, under the vast Dakota sky, the cowboy and the woman he'd saved held each other close and thanked God and fate and whatever force had brought them together on that August day so long ago. The years continued their steady march. Ben and Olivia grew older, but never lost the connection that had sparked between them. They became the patriarch and matriarch of a large and loving family, their children and grandchildren always welcome at the ranch that had become the center of their world. In 1915, Ben fell ill with pneumonia during a particularly harsh winter. For several terrifying weeks, Olivia nursed him around the clock, refusing to leave his side. The whole family gathered, fearing the worst, but Ben was too stubborn to leave his wife and rallied against all odds. When he finally recovered, Olivia held him and cried with relief. "You scared me," she scolded, her face buried in his shoulder. "Sorry, love, I'm not ready to leave you yet. Made a promise to keep you forever, and I mean to keep it." "Forever," Olivia whispered. "Don't you dare break that promise, Benjamin Wright." In 1918, when the Great War ended, Jacob came home from serving as a military lawyer, and the family celebrated his safe return with a huge gathering. By then, Ben and Olivia had 14 grandchildren, with more on the way, and the ranch had expanded significantly under Sam's innovative management. Olivia's former students were now leading members of the community, doctors and lawyers and teachers and business owners who credited her with inspiring their success. The school she'd helped build was now called Wright Academy in her honor, though she'd protested the name change vehemently. In 1928, on their 50th wedding anniversary, the entire town of Sioux Falls threw Ben and Olivia a celebration. It was held in the very square where they had met, though now the spot was marked with a small plaque that told the story of the auction and the cowboy who'd stepped forward to change one woman's life. Ben and Olivia, both in their 70s now, but still spry and sharp, stood before the crowd of hundreds, people from all walks of life, who'd been touched by their love story over the years. The mayor gave a speech about how Ben and Olivia represented the best of what South Dakota stood for: courage, compassion, community, and commitment. Then he turned to them and asked, "Mr. Wright, do you have anything you'd like to say to your wife on this momentous occasion?" Ben took Olivia's hand, and though his fingers were gnarled with age and hers were marked with spots and wrinkles, the touch was still electric, still full of all the love they had shared for half a century. 50 years ago, Ben said, his voice carrying across the square, I heard an auctioneer yell, "Who'll take her?" And I stepped forward. I said I'd take her forever, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. Today, 50 years later, I want to say it again. I'll take her forever, Liv. Today, tomorrow, and whatever comes after. You are my heart, my home, my everything. Thank you for 50 years of love. Olivia couldn't speak through her tears, so she simply stood on her toes and kissed her husband right there in the square where their story had begun. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause, and their children and grandchildren rushed forward to embrace them. That evening, back at the ranch with just family around them, Olivia finally found words to respond to Ben's public declaration. You gave me my life back that day, she said, surrounded by the people who existed because of the choice he'd made. You gave me dignity and freedom and love. You gave me dreams I never thought I'd achieve, and a family I never dared hope for. You gave me everything, Ben, and I'd spend 50 more lifetimes with you if I could. Let's shoot for at least 20 more years, Ben replied with the same humor that had sustained them through every challenge. I want to meet some great-grandchildren before I go. And he did. Over the next decade, Ben and Olivia welcomed 16 great-grandchildren into the world, each one a testament to the love that had started on an auction platform in 1878. They remained active and involved in all their descendants' lives, attending school plays and graduations, weddings and christenings, always present and always loving. In 1938, at the age of 82, Olivia published a memoir about her life. She called it The Cowboy's Promise, and it detailed everything from the horror of the auction to the beauty of the life she'd built with Ben. The book became a regional bestseller, and Olivia donated all proceeds to establishing scholarships for children whose families faced financial hardship, ensuring that no child would lose their chance at education due to debt. Ben, at 85, was still working the ranch alongside Sam, though he'd slowed down considerably. But every evening, without fail, he and Olivia would sit on their porch and watch the sunset together, just as they had done for 60 years. On a perfect summer evening in 1940, with fireflies dancing in the grass and the prairie breeze warm and gentle, Ben and Olivia sat in their usual spot. Ben had been quieter than usual that day, more contemplative, and Olivia knew he was thinking about the passage of time. "Do you have any regrets?" she asked him, holding his weathered hand in hers. "Not a single one," Ben replied without hesitation. "Every choice I made led me to you and this life we built. How could I regret any of it?" "I don't either. Even the hard parts, even the loss and the pain, it was all worth it to have loved you." Ben turned to look at her, and in the fading light, Olivia could still see the young cowboy who'd stepped onto that platform so many years ago. "Thank you," he said simply, "for saying yes, for taking a chance on me, for loving me, for everything. Thank you for asking, for stepping forward when no one else would, for keeping your promise." "Forever," Ben whispered and kissed her gently. They sat together until the stars came out, and in that moment, surrounded by the life they'd built and the love they'd nurtured, Ben and Olivia Wright were at perfect peace. Their story had been unconventional, born from desperation and despair, but it had blossomed into something beautiful and enduring. They had loved each other through triumph and tragedy, through war and peace, through youth and old age, and their love had never wavered, never faltered, never failed. The auctioneer had yelled, "Who'll take her?" And the cowboy had stepped forward with, "I'll take her forever." It had been a promise made in haste, a vow spoken before they even knew each other's hearts. But it had become the foundation of a love story for the ages, a testament to the power of choosing compassion over convenience, of seeing the person beneath the circumstances, of believing in forever even when nothing makes sense. As the years passed and eventually both Ben and Olivia left this world, their legacy lived on. Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren carried forward the values they had embodied: kindness, integrity, courage, and above all, love. The ranch remained in the Wright family for generations, and the story of how Ben and Olivia met became family legend, told and retold to every new generation as a reminder that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places. The plaque in Sioux Falls Square still stands today, telling the story of the auction and the cowboy and the promise that changed two lives forever. And if you visit on a summer evening, when the fireflies dance and the prairie breeze whispers through the grass, some say you can still feel the love that Ben and Olivia shared, eternal and unbreakable. A beacon of hope for anyone who's ever needed saving or anyone brave enough to step forward and save them. Their story wasn't a fairy tale. It was better. It was real. It was messy and imperfect and absolutely beautiful. It was a life built on a promise, sustained by love, and perfected through the daily choice to see each other, value each other, and cherish each other through everything life brought their way. And in the end, that promise kept on. That August day in 1878 became exactly what Ben said it would be: forever.